Have you ever wondered what life was truly like for women living between 500 and 1500 AD? Did they spend their days only covered in dirt, completely silent, with no thoughts of their own? Were their lives nothing more than endless toil and constant fear? Prepare to challenge everything you thought you knew about medieval peasant women. Number 10. Always dirty and unkempt. Popular images often show medieval peasant women as perpetually grubby, with tangled hair, mud-caked clothes, and a general aura of unpleasant smells. The idea is that hygiene was non-existent during this period, especially for those who worked the land and lived in humble dwellings. Historical documents, however, paint a different picture, suggesting a far more nuanced approach to cleanliness than often believed. Daily life, even for peasants, involved a surprising level of personal care, not just out of vanity but also for health and spiritual reasons. While modern conveniences like running water and daily showers were certainly absent, people in the Middle Ages were not strangers to washing. Records from towns across medieval Europe show the widespread existence of public bathhouses, or stews as they were sometimes called. These establishments were not exclusive to the wealthy. Many towns had public baths accessible to ordinary folk, including peasants who might visit on market days or during special occasions. These bathhouses offered hot water, steam, and often services like massage. Even in villages, where dedicated bathhouses were rare, communal bathing in rivers, streams, or large tubs filled with heated water was a regular occurrence, especially during warmer months. Beyond full body bathing, daily personal hygiene was a recognized practice. People washed their hands and faces regularly. Water was a readily available resource in most settlements, drawn from wells, rivers, or rain barrels. Historical accounts mention morning rituals that included washing the face and hands, often with water that had been warmed. The use of soap, while not as refined as modern varieties, was known. Lye-based soaps, often made from animal fat and wood ash, were produced and used for both personal washing and laundry. These soaps helped to cleanse skin and clothes, contributing to a sense of freshness and cleanliness. Consider the emphasis on clean linen. Even peasant families, despite their limited resources, strove to own and frequently wash linen undergarments. Tunics, shifts, and aprons worn next to the skin absorbed sweat and dirt, and changing them regularly was a crucial aspect of hygiene. Laundry was a demanding task, often performed communally at rivers or washing stations using heavy wooden paddles and soap. The sight of clean, sun-bleached linen was a sign of a well-kept household, even a humble one. This dedication to clean clothing suggests a far cry from the unkempt image frequently portrayed. Hair care was another aspect of personal grooming. The archaeological digs have uncovered numerous combs made from bone, wood, or antler, even in peasant households. These tools were used for detangling and cleaning hair. While elaborate hairstyles might have been reserved for the elite, peasant women would still braid or cover their hair, and regular combing helped to maintain its cleanliness and order. Head coverings, such as wimples or simple cloths, also served a practical purpose, protecting hair from dust and grime during daily chores. Beyond the physical act of washing, there was a cultural understanding of cleanliness. Medieval medical texts and religious teachings often linked hygiene to health and spiritual purity. For instance, the miasma theory, which suggested diseases were caused by bad air or foul smells, encouraged people to keep their surroundings and themselves clean to ward off illness. Religious practices also often involved washing, particularly before attending church services or during specific rituals. This belief system reinforced the importance of personal cleanliness in daily life. The idea that medieval people, especially peasants, simply wallowed in filth without care is a significant oversimplification. Their standards of hygiene differed from ours, certainly, but they were not non-existent. The practicalities of daily life working with animals, handling crops, and living in close proximity made some level of dirt unavoidable. However, this did not mean a complete abandonment of personal care. Peasant women, like anyone else, would have valued feeling clean and presenting themselves as best they could within their means. Their methods might seem basic today, but they were effective for the time. The persistent portrayal of them as uniformly dirty ignores the evidence of baths, soaps, clean linen, and daily washing rituals that were part of medieval life. They lived in a world without widespread indoor plumbing, but they adapted and found ways to maintain a level of hygiene that challenges the common, inaccurate depiction. Number 9. Completely subservient and silent. The image of a medieval peasant woman often includes her as a meek, silent figure, entirely under the thumb of her husband or father, with no voice or agency in her own life. She is seen as merely a tool for labor and reproduction, with no personal opinions or ability to influence decisions. This depiction, popular in some historical dramas and fantasy tales, dramatically misunderstands the complex social dynamics and economic realities of the medieval village. While patriarchal structures certainly existed, women, even peasant women, held significant roles and possessed a degree of influence that defies the silent, subservient stereotype. Peasant women were vital to the functioning of the household and the village economy. Their labor was not just an auxiliary to that of men, it was indispensable. Women managed the household, which included cooking, cleaning, child-rearing, and textile production, spinning fiber into thread and weaving it into cloth. This textile work was not merely a hobby, it was often a crucial source of income or a means of producing essential goods for the family. A woman's skill in these areas directly impacted the family's well-being. A household could not function without a competent woman managing its internal workings, and this responsibility inherently gave her a powerful position within the domestic sphere. Beyond the home, peasant women frequently participated in agricultural labor alongside men. They were involved in planting, harvesting, gleaning, and caring for small livestock such as chickens and pigs. In some regions, they might even participate in plowing or sowing. Their physical contributions to the farm's productivity were undeniable. A woman's strength and skill in these tasks were valuable assets, making her an active partner in the family's economic survival. This shared labor created a partnership, rather than a purely hierarchical relationship within the peasant household. Furthermore, peasant women often engaged in various forms of informal trade and commerce. They sold surplus eggs, cheese, butter, spun yarn, or woven cloth at local markets. Some became alewives, brewing and selling ale, a common and important beverage in medieval society. These activities gave women a presence in the public sphere and provided them with independent sources of income, however small. Having their own earnings, even if it contributed to the family pot, gave them a basis for asserting their opinions and having a say in financial matters. Market interactions also meant they were not isolated but engaged with a wider community. Legal records and manorial court rolls, historical documents that detail the daily lives of medieval villagers, offer compelling evidence against the silent stereotype. Women regularly appeared in these courts, both as plaintiffs and defendants. They sued others for debts, defended themselves against accusations, and bore witness in disputes. This participation shows they understood local legal customs and were prepared to assert their rights or seek justice. Their voices, far from silent, were heard in these public forums, challenging the idea that they had no means of expressing grievances or defending their interests. Within the family unit, while the husband was often considered the head, the wife frequently exercised considerable practical authority. She managed the family's larder, allocated resources, and made decisions about the upbringing and training of children. In many cases, especially when the husband was away for work or incapacitated, the wife would take over management of the entire farm. She was the one who kept the household running, made sure everyone was fed, and ensured daily tasks were completed. This practical leadership role gave her a strong voice in family matters. Marriage negotiations, while often arranged, were not always entirely without the woman's indirect influence. A woman's reputation for industriousness, skill, and good character was highly valued. Her ability to manage a household and contribute to the farm's productivity made her a desirable match, giving her some leverage in the marriage market. After marriage, her active participation in the household economy meant her opinions carried weight, especially on matters directly related to her areas of responsibility. To portray her as a purely passive recipient of orders ignores the economic and social realities that granted her a degree of agency within her daily life and community. She was a crucial, active participant, not a mute background figure. Number 8. No role beyond childbearing and farm labor. A common misunderstanding about medieval peasant women is that their lives were solely confined to the repetitive cycle of childbearing and grueling agricultural work. This narrow view suggests an existence devoid of any other skills, contributions, or social functions. While reproduction and farm labor were undeniably central to their lives, it is an oversimplification to assume these were their only roles. Medieval peasant women performed a diverse array of tasks, possessed a wide range of practical skills, and contributed to their communities in multifaceted ways that extended far beyond the fields and the birthing bed. One significant area of contribution was textile production. From the raw fiber to the finished cloth, this entire process was predominantly the domain of women. They would clean and prepare wool or flax, then spend countless hours spinning it into yarn, using distaffs and spindles. This spun yarn was then woven into fabric on looms, which could range from simple backstrap looms to larger, more complex ones. The cloth produced was essential for making clothing, bedding, and household linens for the entire family. This was not a minor chore, but a highly skilled craft that required patience, dexterity, and knowledge of materials. The quality of a woman's spinning and weaving directly impacted her family's comfort, and even their ability to trade surplus textiles for other goods. This skill was a fundamental part of the household economy. Beyond textiles, peasant women were often responsible for preparing and preserving food. This involved not just daily cooking over an open fire, but also a complex system of preservation methods necessary to ensure food supply throughout the year. They smoked meats, salted fish, made cheese, churned butter, pickled vegetables, and dried fruits and herbs. These activities required extensive knowledge of food science, seasonal availability, and practical techniques to prevent spoilage. A woman's skill in these areas directly impacted the family's survival, especially during lean months. Her ability to store provisions wisely and make the most of available resources was a critical managerial role. Many peasant women also possessed a deep practical knowledge of herbal remedies and basic medicine. Lacking professional doctors in their villages, they were often the primary caregivers for their families and sometimes for their neighbors. They gathered herbs from fields and forests, knew their properties, and prepared poultices, tinctures, and salves for common ailments, injuries, and fevers. They assisted at childbirth, acting as midwives and providing support to new mothers. This informal medical knowledge was passed down through generations, making women vital repositories of practical healthcare skills within their communities. Their role as healers was indispensable for everyday health challenges. Moreover, peasant women were often involved in cottage industries beyond just textiles. They might brew ale, as previously mentioned, selling it to supplement family income. They could be cheesemakers, producing dairy products for sale. Some engaged in basket weaving, pottery making, or other crafts that could be done from home and provided additional revenue. These entrepreneurial activities show an economic dynamism that goes beyond simple farm labor. They demonstrate women's ability to generate income and contribute to the broader local economy. These social and cultural roles of peasant women were also significant. They were often the primary educators of their children, teaching them not only practical skills but also rudimentary religious instruction and local customs. They played a central role in maintaining family and community bonds, participating in feasts, festivals, and religious ceremonies. They shared news, offered advice, and provided emotional support within their social networks. While their lives were undoubtedly shaped by the demands of agriculture and family, to reduce them to mere childbearers and field hands ignores the vast array of essential skills they mastered and the diverse contributions they made to their households and communities. They were managers, artisans, healers, and educators, indispensable pillars of medieval rural society. Number 7. Ignorant and superstitious. The portrayal of medieval peasant women often leans heavily into a stereotype of profound ignorance and uncritical superstition. They are depicted as simple-minded, easily swayed by magical beliefs, and entirely lacking in any form of rational thought or practical knowledge. This view suggests a population living in intellectual darkness, believing in every folktale or omen without question. However, historical evidence indicates that peasant women possessed a rich body of practical knowledge, understood their world through a combination of observation and tradition, and were not necessarily as uniformly superstitious or ignorant as often imagined. While religious belief and elements of folk tradition were undeniably strong, medieval peasants, including women, operated with a pragmatic understanding of their environment. Their daily lives demanded acute observation and a deep knowledge of natural cycles. Peasant women, through their work in gardening, gathering wild foods, and tending to animals, developed an intimate understanding of plants, weather patterns, and animal behavior. They knew which plants were edible or medicinal, when to sow and harvest specific crops, and how to care for livestock. This was not abstract knowledge, but practical, vital information for survival. This expertise, accumulated over generations, far transcends simple ignorance. Consider their role in healthcare, as mentioned before. The women who acted as village healers or midwives possessed a sophisticated, albeit empirical, understanding of the human body and its ailments. They recognized symptoms, applied specific herbal remedies based on experience, and understood principles of hygiene in basic wound care or childbirth. This knowledge was often passed down orally, sometimes involving practical demonstrations. While some remedies might seem unusual by modern standards, many had a basis in actual medicinal properties. Their approach was practical and often effective given the limited medical understanding of the era. This was not merely superstition, but a grounded observational science built on trial and error over centuries. Furthermore, peasant women had a clear understanding of the social and economic realities of their world. They navigated local markets, understood bartering, and comprehended the value of goods and labor. They knew the customs and laws of their village and manors, as evidenced by their participation in local courts. They could articulate grievances and understand complex relationships of land tenure and feudal obligations. This required a sharp mind and a capacity for reasoning far removed from the notion of naive ignorance. They understood the power structures and how to operate within them to protect their interests or those of their families. The idea of superstition often lumps together genuine religious belief, traditional folk practices, and a lack of scientific understanding. While medieval people certainly attributed events to divine or supernatural causes, this did not preclude them from also seeking practical solutions. A peasant woman might pray for rain, but she would also know when to plant her crops based on accumulated wisdom. She might believe in a protective charm, but she would also mend tools and store food carefully. The two modes of thought often coexisted rather than one completely obliterating the other. Moreover, the term ignorant is often used to imply a lack of literacy. While formal literacy was rare among the peasantry, it does not equate to a lack of intelligence or knowledge. Medieval society was largely oral, and information was transmitted through storytelling, song, observation, and direct instruction. Peasant women participated in this vibrant oral culture, absorbing and transmitting vast amounts of information. They learned complex crafts, managed households with intricate logistical demands, and often possessed a deep understanding of local history and traditions. Their intelligence manifested differently than in literate societies, but it was intelligence nonetheless. The stereotype of the uniformly ignorant and blindly superstitious peasant woman fails to acknowledge the rich, practical, and intelligent engagement she had with her world. Number 6. Lack of personal hygiene and health knowledge. The common portrayal of medieval peasant women often depicts them as living in a state of squalor, completely devoid of any understanding of personal hygiene or health. This narrative suggests rampant disease, a lack of cleanliness, and an absence of any preventative health measures, implying that medieval people simply accepted illness and death as inevitable without any attempts to mitigate them. However, historical research reveals a different story, one where medieval peasant women, within the constraints of their time, practiced forms of hygiene and possessed practical health knowledge that aimed to prevent illness and promote well-being. As previously touched upon, cleanliness was not entirely absent. While daily full-body washing was not universal, personal hygiene was maintained through regular washing of hands and faces, particularly before meals and after working. Cleanliness was often linked to spiritual purity and social respectability, even for the lower classes. Peasant homes, though simple, often contained designated areas for washing. Water, though needing to be fetched, was plentiful in many areas from wells, springs, and rivers. The use of lye-based soaps for both personal cleaning and laundry was common. The frequent washing of linen garments was also a crucial practice for maintaining bodily cleanliness and reducing skin irritations or infections. Beyond personal washing, medieval peasant women were actively involved in household sanitation. This included sweeping floors, removing refuse, and managing waste as best as possible. While waste disposal systems were rudimentary compared to modern sewers, efforts were made to keep living spaces as clean as possible. Animal waste was often collected for fertilizer, and organic scraps might be fed to livestock or composted. Recognizing the correlation between dirt and disease, even if the germ theory was unknown, led to practical measures to maintain a cleaner environment. For example, rushes on floors were regularly changed to remove accumulated dirt and fleas. When it came to health, peasant women were the primary custodians of their family's well-being. They possessed an extensive practical knowledge of herbal medicine passed down through generations. They knew which plants could be used for fevers, digestive issues, skin ailments, or pain relief. They gathered these herbs, dried them, and prepared them into various forms, teas, poultices, salves, and compresses. For instance, chamomile was used for sleep and digestion, plantain for wounds, and willow bark for pain relief. This was not mere superstition, but an empirical system of natural remedies that often had real pharmacological effects. They also understood basic principles of nutrition, recognizing the importance of a varied diet, even if limited by seasonal availability. They knew which foods provided sustenance and which might cause upset. They understood the importance of fresh water and safe food preparation. While food preservation methods like smoking, salting, and drying were primarily for storage, they also served to prevent spoilage and foodborne illnesses. Their knowledge of these practices was crucial for public health at the household level. Childbirth and infant care were areas where peasant women's health knowledge was paramount. The midwives often experienced older women from the village were present at births, offering comfort, guidance, and practical assistance. They understood the stages of labor and basic complications. They also provided postpartum care for mothers and infants, offering advice on breastfeeding, swaddling, and protecting newborns from common dangers. While infant mortality was high, this was due to broader challenges like disease and malnutrition, not a complete lack of care or knowledge. Furthermore, medieval peasant communities practiced a form of social health care. Neighbors helped neighbors during illness, sharing remedies, offering comfort, and assisting with household chores. This communal support system was a vital aspect of health management, particularly for those who could not afford professional medical help. The prevailing idea that medieval peasant women lived in utter filth and ignorance regarding health is a romanticized, often derogatory oversimplification. They actively engaged in hygiene practices and possessed a rich, practical understanding of health, driven by necessity and accumulated wisdom, allowing them to navigate a world without modern medicine. Number 5, no education or skills beyond domestic. The portrayal of medieval peasant women frequently paints them as uneducated and lacking any skills beyond the rudimentary domestic chores required for daily survival. This narrative suggests a life devoid of intellectual engagement, artistry, or specialized abilities, confining their existence to a repetitive cycle of cooking, cleaning, and child-rearing. This overlooks the diverse range of complex skills they acquired, the knowledge they transmitted, and the various forms of education that were vital to their functioning within medieval society. While formal schooling was indeed rare for peasant women, and literacy rates were generally low across the peasantry, this does not mean they were uneducated or unskilled. Education in the Middle Ages for the common folk was primarily vocational and practical. It was learned through apprenticeship, observation, and direct participation in daily tasks from a young age. Peasant girls were educated in the skills necessary to run a household, manage a farm, and contribute to the village economy. This education was rigorous, hands-on, and critical for their survival and well-being. Consider the intricate skills involved in food preparation and preservation, which extended far beyond simple cooking. A peasant woman learned how to mill grain, bake bread, brew ale, churn butter, and make cheese. She mastered the art of curing meats, pickling vegetables, and drying fruits and herbs, techniques that required precise knowledge of timing, ingredients, and processes to ensure food safety and longevity. These were not simple tasks, but sophisticated culinary and scientific skills that required years of practice to perfect. Her knowledge of seasonal cycles, wild edibles, and safe food storage was essential for the family's survival, representing a form of expertise passed down through generations. Textile production also involved a complex set of skills. From cleaning and carding raw wool or flax to spinning thread, dyeing yarn, and weaving cloth, each step demanded dexterity, precision, and an understanding of materials. The spinning wheel, for example, required coordination and rhythm, while weaving on a loom involved intricate patterns and mathematical understanding to create functional and durable fabric. A peasant woman might also be skilled in mending clothes, tailoring simple garments, or even embroidering for personal embellishment or small income. These were specialized crafts that demonstrated considerable skill and artistry. Beyond these core domestic crafts, peasant women often developed other valuable skills. Many were adept at gardening, understanding soil types, crop rotation, and pest control without formal agricultural training. They could identify and gather medicinal plants, demonstrating a deep botanical knowledge. Some women might have possessed rudimentary accounting skills to manage household budgets, track inventories, or oversee small sales at market. Their role in managing the household economy required practical numeracy and organizational abilities. Furthermore, peasant women were key transmitters of cultural knowledge, oral traditions, and religious teachings. They taught their children not only practical skills, but also stories, songs, proverbs, and prayers. They understood the local customs, social etiquette, and unwritten rules of their community. This informal education was critical for socializing children and integrating them into medieval society. To dismiss them as uneducated solely because they lacked formal literacy is to misunderstand the nature of learning and skill acquisition in an agrarian society. Medieval peasant women were highly skilled and deeply knowledgeable in the arts and sciences vital to their world, demonstrating an education far richer than often depicted. Number 4, short lifespans, always pregnant. The image of medieval peasant women often includes the bleak assumptions of extremely short lifespans and a life dominated by continuous pregnancy. This portrayal suggests that women were little more than baby-making machines, dying young from childbirth complications or general hardship, leaving behind a trail of numerous children. While medieval life was certainly hard and infant mortality was high, this common narrative is an oversimplification that fails to capture the full reality of female lifespans and reproductive patterns in the era. It is true that average life expectancy in the Middle Ages was lower than today, often cited around 30 to 35 years. However, this average is heavily skewed by high infant and child mortality rates. If a medieval person, including a peasant woman, survived childhood, their chances of living into their 40s, 50s, and even 60s significantly increased. Many historical records, such as manorial court rolls and wills, show women living long enough to see grandchildren and great-grandchildren. These women, far from dying young, became respected matriarchs, repositories of family and community knowledge, and continued to play active roles in their households. While childbirth was undeniably risky and a leading cause of death for women of reproductive age, it was not a constant state of affairs for every woman throughout her fertile years. Several factors influenced birth spacing and overall fertility rates. Breastfeeding, which was universal and often extended for 2 to 3 years, naturally suppressed ovulation, thus acting as a form of natural birth spacing. The physical demands of peasant life, along with periods of famine or hardship, could also affect fertility and lead to longer intervals between births. Furthermore, medieval peasant women typically married in their late teens or early 20s, not in early adolescence as sometimes depicted for general medieval society. This later age of marriage meant fewer overall reproductive years compared to a theoretical scenario of marrying in one's early teens. While a woman might have several children over her lifetime, it was not necessarily a continuous stream. Records suggest that peasant families typically had between 4 to 6 surviving children on average, not dozens, though many more might have been born but not survived. The idea that women were always pregnant also ignores the significant periods of time when they were not pregnant. Following a birth, there was a period of recovery, then potentially a long period of breastfeeding, before another pregnancy might occur. The physical demands of daily labor meant that women needed time to recover and regain strength. Their bodies were not constantly engaged in gestation. Moreover, a woman's value was not solely tied to her reproductive capacity. Her economic contribution, her skills in household management, her knowledge of medicine, and her role in the community were equally vital. An older woman who had passed her childbearing years was still a deeply valued member of the household, continuing to contribute through her labor, wisdom, and experience. She might assist with childcare for younger generations, manage the household, or oversee younger workers in the fields. The narrative of short lifespans, always pregnant, simplifies a complex demographic reality. While medieval life was undoubtedly challenging, many peasant women lived into adulthood and beyond, often managing their households and raising families, but not necessarily in an unbroken cycle of pregnancies. The image fails to acknowledge the resilience, adaptability, and longevity of many medieval peasant women who shaped their communities over decades, not just a few brief, perilous years. Number 3. No legal rights or protections. The common perception of medieval peasant women often suggests they were entirely without legal rights or protections, completely vulnerable to male authority and possessing no recourse against injustice. This narrative presents them as powerless figures, utterly subservient to fathers, husbands, and lords, with no standing in the eyes of the law. While medieval legal systems were undeniably patriarchal and women's rights were not equivalent to those of men, this view significantly underestimates the legal standing and various protections that medieval peasant women did possess, and the ways in which they actively used the law to their advantage. Crucially, medieval English common law, which influenced much of Europe, recognized women as individuals with legal standing, albeit with certain limitations. Single women, known as femsole, held considerable legal rights. They could own property, inherit land, enter into contracts, sue and be sued in court, and engage in trades independently. While most peasant women eventually married, their single years offered a period of legal autonomy that is often overlooked. They were not simply chattel. Upon marriage, a woman typically became femme covert, meaning her legal identity was largely subsumed under that of her husband. Her property often passed to his control, though she retained a dowry, or dower rights for widowhood. However, this did not strip her of all protection. The husband was legally responsible for his wife's debts and actions, which offered a reciprocal layer of protection. Furthermore, she retained rights to dower, typically 1/3 of her husband's land, for her lifetime should he die before her. This dower was a significant provision, ensuring her economic security as a widow and giving her a degree of independence. Her manorial court rolls provide compelling evidence of peasant women's active participation in the legal system. These local courts dealt with disputes among villagers, minor crimes, and land transfers. Women regularly appeared in these courts, either as plaintiffs seeking justice for wrongs committed against them, as defendants defending themselves against accusations, or as witnesses providing testimony. They sued for debt, complained about trespass, and sought redress for slander. This active engagement demonstrates a clear understanding of legal processes and a willingness to assert their rights. Their voices were heard in these public forums, and their claims were taken seriously. For example, a peasant woman might bring a case against a neighbor for damaged crops, or she might seek compensation for a breach of contract related to a sale of goods. She could also be fined for minor infractions, indicating her individual accountability under local law. The existence of fines specifically levied against women shows they were recognized as legal subjects, not merely extensions of their male relatives. Furthermore, medieval law offered some protections against violence and abuse, even within marriage, though these were often difficult to enforce. While domestic violence was prevalent, it was not universally condoned, and severe abuse could sometimes be brought before a court or result in community ostracization. The church, too, offered a parallel legal system that women could sometimes appeal to for matters of marriage, divorce, or moral grievances. The widows, upon their husband's death, regained their status as femme sole. They could manage their dower lands independently, enter into new contracts, and make decisions about their own lives and their children's inheritance. Many widows became powerful figures in their villages, managing significant estates and even taking on roles as heads of households or businesses. Their legal autonomy as widows challenges the idea of perpetual powerlessness. The historical record shows that medieval peasant women, within the confines of their era, possessed a framework of legal rights and protections that allowed them to assert themselves, defend their interests, and play an active role in the legal life of their communities, a far cry from a state of total vulnerability. Number 2, no social life or community engagement. The popular image of medieval peasant women often portrays them as isolated figures, confined to their homes or fields, with little to no social life or meaningful engagement with their community beyond immediate family members. This depiction suggests a monotonous existence, cut off from broader social interactions, communal celebrations, or informal networks. However, historical evidence clearly shows that medieval peasant women were deeply integrated into vibrant social networks, participated actively in community life, and found numerous opportunities for interaction, entertainment, and mutual support. Life in a medieval village was inherently communal. Their homes were close-knit, and daily chores often involved cooperative efforts. Women would often gather at the communal oven to bake bread, at the village well or stream to fetch water, or at washing places to do laundry. These were not just functional activities. They were significant social hubs where women exchanged news, gossip, advice, and shared burdens. These informal gatherings created strong bonds and a sense of collective identity among the women of the village. Spinning was another widely practiced communal activity. Spinning bees or spinsters' gatherings were common, where women would gather together in one household to spin wool or flax, often chatting, singing, and telling stories as they worked. This collective labor transformed what might have been a solitary chore into a lively social event, fostering camaraderie and shared experience. These gatherings were crucial for emotional support and the transmission of skills and traditions. Religious life provided another major avenue for social engagement. The parish church was the center of village life, and attendance at Sunday services and feast days was universal. Women participated in religious processions, listened to sermons, and took part in communal prayers. Beyond formal services, religious fraternities or guilds often included women and organized social events, charity work, and mutual aid among their members. These provided a structured way for women to connect with others beyond their immediate family unit. Festivals and celebrations were integral to medieval life and offered numerous opportunities for social interaction and entertainment. These included seasonal festivals marking harvests or planting times, saints' days, weddings, and baptisms. Women played active roles in preparing for these events, cooking special foods, brewing ale, and decorating. They participated in dances, games, and storytelling sessions, often interacting with people from neighboring villages. These were moments of joyous communal bonding that broke the monotony of daily labor and fostered strong social ties. Markets and fairs were also significant social events for peasant women. While primarily economic in purpose, they were also bustling centers of social interaction. So women would travel to market to sell their produce or crafts, buy necessary goods, and meet relatives or friends from other villages. They exchanged information, learned about new trends, and observed the wider world beyond their immediate locality. These trips were not just errands, they were social outings that offered a change of pace and an opportunity to connect with a wider network of people. Furthermore, medieval peasant women were deeply involved in informal networks of mutual aid and support. When a neighbor fell ill, when a woman was giving birth, or when a family faced hardship, other women from the community would step in to help with chores, childcare, or provide comfort and food. This system of reciprocal support was essential for survival in a challenging world and fostered profound social connections based on trust and solidarity. The idea that medieval peasant women lived in isolation is a fundamental misunderstanding of the highly interconnected communal nature of medieval village life, where social engagement was not just a luxury but a necessity. Number 1. Dressed in rags and drab colors. The pervasive image of medieval peasant women often depicts them clothed in shapeless, worn-out rags of dull, undyed colors, browns, grays, and dirty off-whites. This portrayal suggests a complete lack of personal expression, aesthetic consideration, or even basic cleanliness in their attire, emphasizing a life of uniform poverty and drabness. This widely held misconception, however, dramatically misrepresents the reality of peasant women's clothing, which, while practical and modest, often incorporated more color, varied textures, and a greater degree of personal care than generally imagined. While the poorest peasants certainly wore simple, patched garments, the notion that all peasant clothing was universally drab and ragged is an oversimplification. Medieval people, including peasants, had access to natural dyes, which allowed for a surprisingly wide range of colors in their clothing. Dyes were derived from plants like woad for blue, madder for reds and oranges, weld for yellows, and various barks and berries for browns, greens, and purples. While bright, expensive dyes like true crimson might have been reserved for the elite, more muted yet distinct shades were achievable and common even for peasant women. A woman might wear a blue tunic, a red apron, or a green head covering, adding vibrancy to her attire. The quality of the fabric, while often coarser than that of the wealthy, was not necessarily rags. Peasant women spun and wove their own linen from flax and wool, producing durable and functional fabrics. Linen was used for undergarments and lighter outer layers, prized for its breathability and ease of washing. The wool was essential for warmth and durability in outer garments. These fabrics, while homespun, were carefully made and maintained. Clothing was an investment, and garments were mended and patched to extend their life, but this does not equate to being perpetually in rags. A well-mended garment was a sign of thrift and practicality, not necessarily utter destitution. Head coverings were an almost universal feature of peasant women's attire, not just for modesty or warmth, but also for practical reasons like protecting hair from dust and dirt during work. These head coverings, which could be simple linen coifs or more elaborate wimples, offered another opportunity for color and texture, sometimes edged with a simple trim or subtle embroidery. Far from being uniform, the styles and materials of head coverings could vary, offering a degree of personal expression. Even though their clothing was dictated by practicality and availability, peasant women still found ways to express individual identity and status within their means. An apron, for instance, a common garment worn over a tunic, could be made from a different color or pattern, serving both a protective and decorative function. A simple embroidery or basic trim might adorn necklines or cuffs. Small accessories like a belt, a simple brooch, or a pouch could also add a touch of personal flair to their otherwise functional outfits. Furthermore, cleanliness was valued, as mentioned before. Fine clothes were washed regularly and undergarments were changed frequently. While outer garments might show signs of wear from hard labor, they were not meant to be perpetually dirty. The image of a peasant woman perpetually covered in grime and tattered cloth fails to acknowledge the effort put into maintaining what clothing they had and the presence of color and texture in their daily wear. Their garments were chosen for utility and durability, but they were not devoid of aesthetic consideration or the basic desire to present oneself in a respectable, clean manner within their societal norms. The common portrayal of medieval peasant women as uniformly clad in drab rags simplifies a reality that included a surprising diversity of color and careful maintenance of their essential garments.